Me, kitty, kitty. Oh no, not on speaker.
One of them's kind of a ham, so you never know. She might hear you.
Good to see you again.
You too.
Yeah, let's keep the first question broad. Is what do you make of what we're seeing right now? It's there are negotiations. Trump did say that the negotiations they were cancelled on the weekend, but they'll continue in Qatar. There's a bit of a power struggle happening in the Strait of Hormuz. I know you've been advocating for the US to just walk away. Also, walking away is a process. You know, I think it's during negotiations. I think each side is trying to get the best terms it can get. Also, the US has to walk away in a way because we agree on the fact that the US should walk away for its own sake. But it also has to do it in a way that takes into consideration allies that feel screwed by this war. You know, if the US just walks away and lets Iran control the Strait of Hormuz, that would cause issues with Gulf countries that don't want to see that happen. So I think the US should at least make some effort to try to get concessions on that front with Iran, maybe a temporary toll booth or no toll booth at all. And this is what we're seeing. Do you like Trump's strategy right now where he's being pretty harsh, but at the same time, making sure he doesn't breach the ceasefire? Not breach the ceasefire, breach the ceasefire, doesn't completely collapse the negotiations and the deal.
Yeah, I mean, Trump's in a difficult position because he wants to be able to say that he has a MOU that leads to a deal. He's really hung up on having this paperwork essentially that says we got an MOU, both sides signed it, and that's going to lead to a deal. So I think we're kind of getting wrapped around the axle on that detail, and that has become a point of contention, and that's resulted in this tit-for-tat violence going back and forth because we don't want to just admit, and I don't think we'd have to admit this publicly. I think Trump could continue to message victory, and most people would believe him. But I think when we're having frank conversations with allies, I just think we have to say, look, we miscalculated here and the balance in the Gulf has clearly shifted and we will be in a better position, all of us, in the long run if we don't try and shoot it out anymore because we tried the shooting it out. We tried to open up the straits by force. That didn't work. If we keep going back and forth, that's going to lead to more just, back and forth strikes, more destruction, more strangling of commerce on the Straits of Hormuz. Let's keep the main thing, and do everything that we can right now to keep the straits open. If that requires going to the Omanis and going to the Iranians and saying, okay, what's realistic here in terms of how do we keep the strait open? I think the leverage that we have there is we do pull our forces out as quickly as we possibly can to take away leverage from the Iranians, because then the Iranians won't have targets to hit. And then we can use the carrots of unfreezing assets and sanctions relief, because once the strait is fully open, Iran's not going to have a justification for closing it down, especially if our forces are out of there, and they're going to want sanctions relief to start moving more of their oil out to the market. So I think if we leaned heavily on our economic tools and kind of drowned out the rest of the MOU and really just focused on getting the Straits of Hormuz open first and foremost, making sure that's functional, then we could come back and address the rest of the MOU. But instead, we've gone and we've cut this other side deal in Lebanon, knowing that Lebanon's a hot button issue that we really don't have a lot of control over. But then we jumped in and said, no, we want to play referee here. We're not going to force the Israelis to withdraw. I think if we got our troops out of the Gulf, out of the Straits of Hormuz, and then we said to the Israelis publicly, we're cutting you guys off because of your actions inside Lebanon, then we could go to the Iranians and say, look, we can't control what the Israelis are going to do in Lebanon, but we have cut ties with them militarily until they actually withdraw from Lebanon. And so if they withdraw from Lebanon, then you guys can get Hezbollah to stop shooting at them. But we want to keep the main thing, and that is the Straits of Hormuz being opened. Because if we keep getting wrapped around all these other different details, we're going to follow this pattern until the war escalates further.
Yeah, you made a good point. From us advocating for Trump walking away to now CENTCOM commander going to Lebanon to make sure a deal that the US just signed up to gets implemented. That's not what walking away looks like, does it?
No, it's not. And look, our history of jumping in the middle of anyone's sectarian conflict anywhere in the world is really poor. It's especially poor in the Middle East, and it's especially really poor in Lebanon. It is a very complex situation there. Our only interest in Lebanon right now, I think, is telling the Israelis to get the hell out of Lebanon. Like, obviously, if the Israelis get shot at legitimately from Lebanese territory in Israel, we don't expect them just to take that on the chin. However, when Israel is making incursions into Lebanon and killing thousands of people in Lebanon, that is where we do have to cut them off. That's the only thing that we should care about right now in Lebanon, is getting the Israelis out of there and cutting off our military aid to them and showing the Iranians, because that gives us a negotiating chip, not because we're kowtowing to the Iranians, but that gives us a negotiating chip and saying, we have cut off the Israelis. Now let's talk shop about the only thing that matters, and that is getting the Straits of Hormuz open.
Have you seen any action on the American side to show that the relationship with Israel is changing? We saw the rhetoric from Trump and J.D. Vance, but I haven't seen anything since. We saw a deal in Lebanon, but that deal is worse off for Lebanon than what is under the MOU. The MOU included, based on the discussions they've had as well, full Israeli withdrawal, unconditional Israeli withdrawal. Now there's a new deal in Lebanon that is a conditional Israeli withdrawal. And, there's good reasons to be skeptical that Israel would abide by its side of the deal. But other than that, I haven't heard anything about Section 224. I haven't heard anything about what Senator Cotton is trying to pass through with the merging of Mossad and the CIA. There doesn't seem to be any change yet. Are you seeing the same?
Exactly. Until we see the actual act of us taking away things from the Israelis and then us aggressively going after these amendments to the NDAA and what Senator Cotton is proposing, the relationship remains the same. And that's why the Israelis, I still think they're going to change their tactics. They're going to probably debate their tactics internally. Do they go for broke? Do they keep pushing this? Or do they kind of sit back? I mean, the Israelis have consistently been several steps ahead of us on all of this. I mean, I talk about this all the time. Early on in the war, the Israelis got us on board with killing the Ayatollah, and then the Israelis went and killed negotiators. They killed a lot of the moderates. And the reason why the Israelis did that was because they knew that this war in America would become very, very politically controversial. And so they wanted to make it so that we couldn't extricate ourselves from it, so that we would only have a more hardline and emboldened IRGC-led government to deal with. And I think we're seeing the result of that right now, because the Iranians are definitely playing a game here too. They know they have leverage. They know it's the Straits of Hormuz. And so you've got a lot of guys right now who are saying, hey, well, we have leverage. Let's extract as many concessions as we possibly can. The moderates basically got us to this point. Let's actually use leverage when we have it. So the Israelis knew this was going to happen. They stayed ahead of us. They also know that President Trump is probably the last president that's going to give them carte blanche. As a matter of fact, the Congress and the Senate that's in power right now, they might be the last Congress and Senate that give the Israelis carte blanche. So right now, while they have that level of control, they're going to bake things in like the NDA Section 224, the bill that Tom Cotton has proposed. And now, because all these other issues that I think are basically minor issues, they're not our business, minus our limited scope of interest, like Lebanon and Hezbollah, and we were playing referee there. All that is at the forefront. And while in the background, the aid is still flowing to Israel, enabling their operations that are inhibiting our ability to get peace with Iran, and then also further codifying how Israel is going to have its hooks into our defense industrial base and our intelligence services.
Do you worry that we could see a resumption of the war? There's a lot of people talking about how what is happening right now is just to give Trump breathing space, to rearm, to get oil prices down, maybe even long-term pause to build up strategic reserves again, the petroleum strategic reserves. But the mission is not accomplished, and we may see a resumption of the war. Is that a concern that you have, or do you think that this is it, at least when it comes to Iran?
No, this is a big concern that I have. I mean, look, the Middle East is a very, very frustrating place to work in, and American leaders consistently will get frustrated with negotiations. They'll get frustrated with the nuance. They'll be told, you can't leave, you can't withdraw, we can't leave now, we've already invested so much. And then the military will come in and say, hey, sir, we actually have military options. And that's exactly what I know President Trump is being told right now. The problem is it kind of takes us back to square one. If any of those military options had worked before, President Trump would have executed them by now. But this is what CENTCOM does very, very effectively, is they'll come and say, okay, we still have more courses of action that we could employ on the battlefield in the event that these negotiations don't work. And the way that the MOU has been structured, the agreement we came up with in Lebanon, they're working against themselves. And again, the Iranians have a lot of upper hands here right now. This is why I just advocate for the walk away method, because if we stay here and we play and we say that we need to reconstitute our bases in the region, we need to still be calling shots in the Straits of Hormuz, we need to be calling shots on the sectarian war in Lebanon and all these other countries, then we're going to continue to have to be deeply involved, and we're going to have to continue to leverage more resources. We have way more options if we extricate ourselves from this and just focus on what truly matters to the security of America. And that's a very, very narrow scope. I mean, that's basically limited counterterrorism against the people who actually plan and intend to come to America to kill Americans, and basically keeping the Straits of Hormuz open. But we're bogged down, and I think the president's going to be frustrated. I think a lot of people are going to play to his ego, and they're going to say, hey, you started off by being this, revolutionary president who was going to take Iran, to the woodshed. No one else could do it for 47 years, but now you've stopped. You need to finish the job, Mr. President, finish the job. And they're going to give him a bunch of nonsense from the Bush era, and they're going to say, look, wartime presidents, they're always really, really popular. They're obviously feeding him a bunch of nonsensical polls right now, because he's posting them all the time on his Truth Social about his approval rating, et cetera.
Do you think he believes them, or he's just
I think President
propaganda
Trump,
campaign?
I think that he believes, and a lot of times he's right. I think President Trump believes that if he speaks things enough and with enough authority, that he can basically breathe them into life. And a lot of times he is correct. Although, the public support for resuming the war or going, just winning at all costs, I just don't think that's there. He was right when he said the MOU is almost, at a 70% approval rate, because the Americans weren't behind the war in the first place. I don't think most Americans read the 14-point MOU, but I think they said, oh, we got a peace deal. That's great. Good job, Mr. President. Get us out of this war. That's why if he would just really take a look at what our core interests are and say, hey, the reality is going to be whatever I say it's going to be. Let's just get everybody out, make sure we're home with plenty of time to go campaign for the midterms, get the Straits of Hormuz opened up so we can start bringing down the price at the pump. That's going to be a win for him. All this other stuff that the neocons and the Israeli lobby is trying to get him sucked into, it is just the road to disaster and ruin for the rest of his administration.
I want to, Lisa, can you show that image I just sent you? I thought of this. I saw this New York Times piece. I've known about this for a few days now, a few weeks. I'll read out this New York Times piece. The Trump administration has secured a deal granting a U.S. company access to one of the world's largest untapped tungsten reserves in Kazakhstan, with the Commerce Department approving preliminary applications for as much as $1.6 billion in federal financing for the project. The deal has drawn scrutiny because the U.S. president's son, Trump Jr. and Eric Trump, became investors in a corporate entity tied to the project. Separately, Cantor Fitzgerald, the investment firm controlled by Howard Lutnick and his family and overseen by his sons, helped raise $210 million for a related investor. So we could see here, it's pretty clear, there's a lot of overlap between American politics and politicians, including the president and his family, along with his administration, along with deals that the U.S. government is finalizing with other countries. The reason I'm bringing this up now is, how big of a role do you think money plays in decisions being made, including Iran? One of my guests we were talking about the Reconstruction Fund, and they made a joke. They're like, yeah, we'll see what involvement Jared Kushner and Witkoff will have in that reconstruction, and other people in Trump's administration and the reconstruction of Iran. The question is, how big of a role do you think business plays in politics? Is it more in this administration than previous administrations? And number three, is that really a bad thing? I know from the onset, we look at it as like, oh, this is corruption. This is not right. But when you put business along with politics, you put pragmatism, you start, having clear incentives, and it's easier to solve business problems than solve ideological or political or personal problems. Not sure if my question makes sense, but it's just a thought I've been having.
Well, in this administration, unfortunately, it seems, and I hope that we can be proven wrong, it does seem that the president and, his sons, Don Jr., who I like and I know, and then other ones as well. Very nice guy, yeah. And, other ones that you just pointed out too, it does seem like there's a lot of entanglement there. And so for me, I don't even know why they're making themselves open to this criticism. I don't see why they're not doing everything they can to keep their business dealings away from the government and away from the administration. Exactly. I mean, in the first administration, we know why. In the first administration, Yeah, it's unfortunate. It is just human nature, and so I hate to see it.
Make your
and
point
again,
about the first administration. It's an interesting point. How it was the
yeah,
opposite of the first
it was the
administration,
opposite.
wasn't
In
it?
the first administration, the president and everyone around him was very, very conscientious of the fact that they were going to be accused of this, and they went out of their way to the point where they lost money. Now they did what I think was the noble thing to do, where they said, "Hey, we're already pretty elite, we're already pretty wealthy. We do view this as service to our nation, and our businesses may take a hit, but we're here to serve the country." And I think a lot of us who were in the Trump base at the time, we saw that and we were like, "This is great. This is fantastic. This is yet another reason why President Trump is our fighter, and he can't be bought off by the money, etc." Conversely, this administration, it seems to be the exact opposite. Now, I do appreciate having a businessman's perspective. Everything I just outlined on why we should just focus on the Straits of Hormuz, that's how I'm hoping the president starts looking at these things. I feel right now that we have like this deadly confluence right now of greed, but then this certain ideology that's met at a confluence where it's basically we're pursuing business deals that are beneficial to people in President Trump's orbit. But at the same time, the ideologues, in particular in the Middle East, we're talking about the Israeli lobby and a lot of the neocons, they've seen this and they've exploited that. And they're using that to drive their agenda. Basically the Abraham Accords, I think, went from being a very unconventional solution to a problem that had plagued the region for a very long time, where we had the Israelis make peace with a lot of their Arab partners to form an alliance essentially against Iran and to leave the issue of Palestine kind of on the back burner. It was a very smart concept. And I think Jared Kushner deserves a lot of credit for that in the first administration. But now what we've seen with what took place in Gaza, the Israelis basically destroyed that. They took the bait. I think this is part of the reason why Iran funded Hamas and they wanted October 7th. They wanted to undermine the Abraham Accords. Israel took the bait and conducted a genocide. And then there became this whole, like, we're going to rebuild Gaza, and then money got involved. And then it just all seemed very, very dirty and very, very corrupt. And so now I think the Abraham Accords has this whole veneer over it of it's going to be nothing but a bunch of land grabs and, business deals that enrich the president and people in his inner circle. And again, when we're talking about the Middle East, we are talking about a lot of that lobbying coming from the pro-Israel lobby. And a lot of this does benefit the state of Israel and people who are closely tied with the state of Israel, many of whom are also closely affiliated with the president and his family. It just is what it is. I wish it wasn't that case. I don't know why they've decided to go down this path in this administration. I hope they stop as soon as possible. And they really just take the expertise of a businessman and view America essentially as a business, and we need to cut business deals that are good for all of America. I think another thing that appealed to people about President Trump is that he never really lied about who he was. He never did that whole like, oh, I'm going to put on a flannel shirt and pretend I'm a construction worker. He was always like, I am an elite businessman, but I view my success as the success of our country. And so I want to make everyone in the country successful. I think this harkens back to like the old elites in our nation. Every country is going to have elites. The question is, do they hate the people or do they serve the people? And right now, unfortunately, I feel like he's veering way towards, we don't really care about the American people. We care about cutting these business deals and enriching our fellow elites.
Do you think the US, would you call I know it's a democracy, but do you think it's also an oligarchy? So in other words, how much influence do you think the richest men and women of the United States have over politics? Because a lot of us on the outside like to speculate, but you probably have better insight into this than anyone, or than at least people listening, including myself.
It seems to me in the last 20 plus years, we are trending much more towards becoming an oligarchy. If you just look at how wealth is built in this country, who are the richest people in this country and how they made their money, and that proximity to the government. And then a lot of this goes to our political system, where just how donors essentially can play a key role. The introduction of dark money that can't be tracked, that's, you can donate essentially an unlimited amount of money to different political action committees that support different candidates. It is becoming much more of an oligarchy, I think, than, a true where, any young man or young woman can pull themselves up by their bootstraps. I mean, there's different sets of rules for a lot of the major corporations and for the most powerful in our country than there are for the little guy. I think our system basically has socialized all the risks. So, for instance, the great financial crisis of 2008, 2009, all the little guys paid for that bubble, but that bubble was created by a lot of the different billionaires who never suffered the repercussions. The banks all got bailouts, but people basically lost their shirt. That system has basically just been enriched and capitalized upon. And so now we have basically a billionaire class that has access to politicians because they're able to buy them off, and they play by a completely different set of rules. And we're seeing a strain, obviously, on the right of populism. President Trump, to a certain extent, he represented that. He was not initially a country club Republican. A lot of his policies about returning American manufacturing, those types of things, the tariffs program that was supposed to support the little guy. But then on the left, we are seeing this reconstitution, basically, of socialist Democrats, many of whom sound very socialistic. They sound very communist. They're talking about going after and taxing the billionaires, the oligarchs, etc. This is all a backlash based on just how corrupt and unjust the current system is. So if we don't get this on track, and right now, unfortunately, I fear as a former, I don't know what I am, a right-wing populist who believe in the MAGA movement, our theory of the case, because of the actions this administration is taking right now, we're going to lose the argument, and we're not going to lose it to the country club Republicans. We're not going to lose it to the normal Democrats. We're going to lose it to the most progressive socialists right now, because their message is compelling. If you look at Mondami in New York, and you look at the way a lot of the new bright shining stars of the Democrat Party are talking, they are speaking in very, very socialistic terms.
Yeah, you were talking about how Trump was different, and then something happened and he changed. Because it always goes back to that. Actually, after our discussion, after you told me about how concerned you are, you and Tucker and others started, Marjorie, talking about how he really changed after Butler. I got Kent Silva on the show. Yeah. We did 3 episodes. People loved it. Great. We did the first one on the assassination attempt in Butler. After an hour, it still wasn't enough. We just finished asking all the questions and all the bizarre things that happened on the day. Then we had to do a part 2 because people wanted it in the comments. So we did a part 2, and that was just on Butler. And at the end of part 2, he's like, by the way, Mario, do you know about the Ruth guy, the one at the golf course? There's a lot of bizarre things there. I'm like, come on, man. Because I know one bizarre thing. How did he know that Trump was going to play golf on that day? And he knew only minutes after Trump told the Secret Service, by the way. So Trump told the Secret Service. 5 minutes later, the guy goes to that location, which you know about. So we do an episode 3 about that as well. And my conclusion after all this is it's not fun to be a president of a country like the United States. It's I'm actually going to ask you a tough question. Or maybe it's an easy question for you because you're pretty open. Have you witnessed any of that yourself? You seem to be a straight shooter. I don't know if anyone would approach you with propositions like this, but were you ever approached with a proposition that you thought ethically wouldn't make sense?
I haven't, but I think the people who make these approaches are pros, and they make assessments. I had ran for Congress twice before unsuccessfully, and I wasn't very good at raising money because I raised money from small dollar donors. I went and talked to some of the PACs and basically just sort of was a straight shooter and told them how I felt about certain issues. And so those PACs didn't give me any money. So I feel like they're.
How much would you want to be paid to be able to pursue a certain policy? It's like, I'll only pursue it if I believe in it. Cross. That was it. That's like the question of whether you qualify or not.
Yeah, with a lot of the PACs, they're pretty forward. I mean, they want to know exactly how you feel and how you vote, or if you're willing to be programmed and you say like, well, I don't know, what is my position on tariffs? What is my position on aid to Israel? Those are the people that they're looking for. And so I think some of us, I'm sure, I mean, I don't know for sure, but like people like Marjorie Taylor Greene, I had this conversation. Matt Gaetz, gave me some really good advice when I first started running for Congress. He was like, dude, don't even take any corporate PAC money. He's like, it's not worth it. Just tell him you're not interested. And it was some of the best advice I ever got, because he was 100% right, even though I wasn't successful. But so I think that these people, these powerful people, they have pretty good dossiers and they have a pretty good idea of who's going to be amenable and who's not.
Do you think you're being spied on now?
Oh, I'm sure. I think we're all being spied on now. Yeah, 100%. Yeah.
The reason I ask is because you mentioned Matt Gaetz, and I just started remembering what he went through and how they went after him on a personal level as soon as Trump wanted him to join his administration. because Matt has been on my show, etc., and it's just a shame. He was like at a peak and he was doing just so well politically, and then they just went after him. And then I immediately started thinking about they must be preparing things on you in case you decide to make a move. If you go against the establishment, they're trying to stock up on some data, some information. Man,
nowadays they just make stuff up, which is kind of what they did. I mean, when you roll back everything they threw at Matt Gaetz, it was basically all made up, and there's people who ended up going to jail for the things that they were trying to do to him. So
really
nowadays, that's another. I mean, I don't. He's spoken about it before, but there's folks in jail who tried to extort him and his father. They were trying to extort him and basically say, we're going to release damning information on you. And Gates said, well, the information you say that you have just doesn't exist. And so they ended up going to the authorities and got the people who were trying to extort Gates. But at the same time, the accusation was already out there in the media. And so you had people saying horrible, horrible things about him. And so I think with our modern media environment and AI and deep fakes and all this, I don't even know how much dirt they really need on people. They can really just kind of make stuff up and put it out there in the media environment. And then the process is the punishment.
It is pretty scary. It is pretty scary, yeah. I think about this a lot, by the way, and I'm not even in politics. Like if you don't have before the insurance policy would be have a clean life, like just don't do anything that could be used against you. You meet a girl at a bar, just try to avoid it, try to resist, that type of thing. But in today's AI and the ability to just fabricate things, even that may not be enough.
Right. And I think if something, comes out that's embarrassing or whatever, just don't let it destroy you. I mean, I think just coming out and saying like, yeah, I did this, whatever, there's been some people like that before. I think they attempted to do something like that to Glenn Greenwald, and he basically came out and said like, I don't care. And he just kept moving. And everybody who supported Glenn was just like, yeah, we don't care either. Glenn's personal life is his personal life. You're going after him because, he is the guy behind so many different disclosures, great investigative journalism, et cetera. So I do think in a way that the environment for that type of thing is changing quite a bit.
Yeah, like Glenn, from I remember, there was like a sex tape of him released or something. And I just, when I saw that, it's like, for me, it was like proof that he's doing the right thing. And it just gave him, in my view, today's age, gave him more credibility. It's like, I didn't even bother about, like, who gives a shit about a sex tape? He's talking about Russia, Ukraine, Gaza, the Israeli lobby, and then we're going to care if he has a sex tape or who it's with or what the story is. It's just such a silly way to bring someone down. I think people are becoming immune to it, but it's still worrying. What worries me is less reputational shit, because I think that's working less and less. When you have people like Kim Kardashian, I know we've moved away from Iran, but it's all related because we're talking about how decisions are made. When you have someone like Kim Kardashian that gains popularity because of a sex tape, for me, the whole strategy of destroying someone's image worries me less. Hey, she's there. The cat is there. I saw her. Took her a while. What worries me though is the legal system, and that's the next question I have is. Would you still say the US has one of the best legal systems in the world, or you stand to doubt that as well?
Oh, in theory, like as it's written, it's the best legal system in the world. The problem is we have humans that are involved in it, and there has been, I think, just so much. There's been so much corruption. There's been the ability to influence and to taint. So I don't have as much confidence in it as I once did before. Just like everything we talked about with the oligarchy taking over, the amount of influence that outside groups can have. I do not have as much confidence in the legal system. I mean, look, we saw it weaponized against President Trump. They were doing everything they could. The apparatus was doing everything they could to make it so that President Trump couldn't run for president again. I mean, they were just drumming things up. We saw this ad nauseum. So I personally don't have a lot of faith in it. And I mean, this is yet another reason, just like the intelligence community, this is another place where we need massive reforms in accountability. Otherwise, people just simply aren't going to trust these very powerful institutions.
What's your plan now? What are you planning to do?
It's a good question. I want to stay active in this space in arguing on how our country should conduct its foreign policy. I'm very concerned that we're going to, continue marching towards a broader war with Iran. So I want to do everything I can to prevent that from happening. But going into 2028, I have no plan to run for office or anything. But I do want to be vocal and make sure whoever it is that we're going to put, top of the ticket on the Republican Party is actually going to do everything they can to get us out of these foreign wars.
Are you planning to run with Tucker? You're running with Tucker, aren't you? You're running with Tucker. I just saw it. I just saw it in your eyes.
I have no plans to run. I would like to advise and work on the national security side, because we do need people who have experience in national security, especially in terms of how we're going to go after the deep state. If we ever get a chance again, we can't go back and fall back to this neoconservative idea that basically we can just go to war with the entire world like we're doing right now. We need a true America first foreign policy. So I want to advocate for that. I want to stay active in that. I think we have an ability right now to build a broad coalition of people who might not agree on every issue, but we do agree on, foreign influence in our government, the issue of Israel, the issue of AIPAC, and then, more foreign wars and holding the deep state accountable. I think on those issues right there, we could build a very broad populist coalition. And the Republican Party, in many cases, is the best venue for that, because of the way the Republican Party selects its candidates. It still is a much more freer process than the Democrat side. So I think in many ways, as long as we could articulate that properly, I do think we could attract a lot of voters back over to the Republican side. I think in the near term, or not in the not so distant future, though, I do think that there is going to be a desire for a third party, for an independent party. And I think there's a potential to build a platform on an independent party that really just looks at this issue of foreign policy, foreign aid, and actually finally putting the American people first.
Just imagine Tucker, yourself, Tulsi, who else? Massey, man.
That'd be great.
That's an idea. That's something. I think the world would be just listening to this. The world, except maybe one country, maybe one or two. I can only think of one. All other countries would be watching this. Would be like, that would be a hell of a plan for the United States. Do you think that could happen? Do you think we could see just a massive, massive shift in U.S. policy? Let's see, like right now, there's images. Just show this. Just give you an idea of, we're talking about what to do in the U.S., the issues in the U.S. And by the way, the state of the United States is concerning. Like, I just don't want to be that type of person that always talks about the, homelessness or this epidemic, etc. But then you start looking at the facts. One of my guests was talking about the literacy rates. It's freaking awful. And then you see images. Show this image, please, Lisa. If you show these images now of Brad Cooper, Admiral Brad Cooper, shaking hands with the Lebanese armed forces, the general of the Lebanese armed forces. For me, I was like, I want what's best for Lebanon. I was born in that country, so I want it to do well. But I'm like, guys, for the sake of the United States, like if I look at this objectively, for the sake of the United States, just get the hell out of there. Will Lebanon be able to sort the Israel issue? Probably not. Will they be able to sort the Hezbollah issue? Probably not. But it's not your problem. You have enough problems of your own. Like, I'd love you to fix the world if I'm like kumbaya type person. Like, the United States should help sort poverty in Africa, end the war in Russia, Ukraine, bring peace to the Middle East. I'd love that. And that was the younger me, by the way. I always looked at the United States as the country that will bring peace and prosperity around the world. That was me as a kid. But when you start looking at the reality of it, that's just not how the world works. So Brad Cooper should not be there. He has nothing to do with that country. And that country might benefit from Brad Cooper being there, but Admiral Brad Cooper and the United States do not. So actually,
couldn't agree more, man. I mean, and I felt the same way when I was younger too. That's why I deployed to Iraq and all these other places, because I thought we were gonna fix the world. And so when I say I don't think we're gonna fix Lebanon, it's not a cheap shot from the bleachers. Like, I've been there. I've tried to fix all these countries by coming in as a American saying, hey, we're going to fix these things. It doesn't work. It ends up costing our country more. And I do think most, especially younger voters under the age of like 50 or so, they've just seen this their entire life. And so I think to what you were saying, I do think that there's a real potential for, some of us to cobble together a political coalition and to actually have a real political revolution in this country where we break ourselves free from trying to have this empire that doesn't serve the American people.
As you were the director of the NCC, the National Counter-Terrorism Center. Was Hezbollah ever a threat to the United States?
So Hezbollah operatives were not planning to come to America and kill Americans. Hezbollah, and I would say by and large, the majority of Iranian-backed Shia militant groups, Shia terrorist organizations, they only posed a threat to America when we were in their countries or countries near them, meddling in their affairs, trying to push an agenda. Hezbollah is very capable terrorist organization. They can be a very dangerous terrorist organization. They sent their operatives into Iraq when we were in Iraq to fight with some of the Shia militias there. Iran funded the majority of it, provided the trainers. But again, these weren't guys who were getting on, jet airplanes to come here to America. to kill American citizens. That's Al-Qaeda. That's ISIS. So I was really adamant while I was in the administration that a lot of these different Shia organizations, Shia groups, if we stayed away from them, they essentially would stay away from us. And in many cases, these Shia organizations, Hezbollah and the Iraqi Popular Mobilization Forces are a good example. They did fight with us indirectly against ISIS and terrorist organizations like ISIS and Al-Qaeda who did want to come to America and kill Americans. So I think we do a poor job here in America of explaining these things to people. I have people yell at me all the time and just say, like, how can you be so soft on Islamic terrorism? The Ayatollah, he backs all these different terrorist groups. And it's just like, okay, most people don't understand the difference between Shias and Sunnis. They don't understand the Salafi jihadis. They don't understand Hezbollah. But the basic facts are the basic facts. There's never been, Hezbollah operatives. There's never been Shia militants who have said, we are going to come to America and kill Americans on American soil. It just doesn't happen.
Yeah, and people that would argue these terrorist organizations don't like the US, Tucker said this, because the US is a democracy. And I think it was Osama bin Laden in an interview. I think it was him. He's like, if we have a problem with democracy, why don't we attack Finland or Sweden? Why the United States? And he's like, we attack the United States, or we see the United States as an enemy because of what the United States is doing in our countries, in our neighboring countries. And when people talk about Iran posing a threat to American soldiers and having killed American soldiers, that's true. And you can look at it as a threat. It's definitely not an ally or not a friendly country to the United States. But all these soldiers were killed, unfortunately, but they were killed in a war in a neighboring country to Iran. So when you're a country that gets involved in neighboring countries, when you go to a country like Iraq and then you have groups within Iraq or neighboring countries that attack the soldiers, you should probably look at the core problem. That's how I see it. And by the way, if you want to disagree with me, always do. I love being disagreed with. But the way I see it is the core problem, maybe it's not the groups themselves, is what led them to have that hostility towards American soldiers or Americans. And maybe just ask them. Like, you can look at them as, the thing is, when you call a group terrorist organization, it's like you should never listen to them. They're not even human. Like, when you dehumanize any group, it first allows you to commit atrocities against them. That's something I've learned in my interviews. Whenever a group is being dehumanized, Palestinians in Israel, in Gaza, they get dehumanized to allow the atrocities to happen without someone having empathy towards it. But when you dehumanize a group as a terrorist organization, how can you talk to a terrorist organization? But the problem is, these are other humans just like me and you. They share our genes. So our same genetic code. So if you don't listen to them and understand why they have the hostility to the United States, you never get to solve the core problem, and it just keeps feeding itself. And I don't like these, for me, just kind of a logical thing, not a complex thing to think about. Do you guys have those discussions at the NCCs? Like, hey, why are they hostile towards us? Or, when someone works at the NCC, it's like, hey, they're a hostile group. The why doesn't matter. We just want to make sure they don't get to the United States or they don't harm us in the United States.
Unfortunately, a lot of times just things move so quickly that it's really just binary. It's just, hey, if this group is a terrorist organization, we need to assess it and triage it. Is it a threat right now? But I would say we do, designate a lot of different people to look at strategic analysis and to try and look at like the root causes. A lot of times this analysis isn't as sexy, and a lot of people don't read it because it doesn't result in, painting an X on where a bad guy is and being able to drop a bomb on him. So it doesn't usually get the attention that it deserves. But, as the war drug on, especially over the last 25 years, a lot of guys like me who spent a lot of time on the ground, we gained a different perspective from dealing so much with the cultures and the peoples of these countries. And so we were starting to put a lot of this kind of down on paper and to have more assessments about it. Now, unfortunately, it's a lot of nuance and it's a complicated discussion, and things move so quickly that a lot of times this all gets, kind of lost in the mix. And it's much easier just to say this group or that group is a terrorist organization. I think, one of the key problems one of the key mistakes that we've made here by going to war with Iran and taking this much more aggressive stance against Iran is that President Trump's initial strategy against Iran in the first Trump administration, it actually was working. I understand where there was a lot of veterans like me from Iraq who said that we have a score to settle with the Iranians. They've killed lots of Americans. Iranians that was true. When President Trump killed Qasem Soleimani and Abu Mahdi Mohandas, that basically took out the two guys who were responsible for the vast majority of those deaths. But then Trump was smart enough not to get us sucked into a regime change war, and he basically reset that relationship. And that's why the Iranians were withholding their proxies. That's why they were at the negotiating table with us. Wars end. We always end up talking to our enemy at some point. We always end up, we say we don't negotiate with terror. We always end up doing some form of back channel.
Taliban.
We always sit down with them. Taliban, we replace the Taliban with the Taliban, because at the end of the day, you know, the Taliban Pashtuns, like, they were way different than us, but none of them were getting on airplanes to come over here and kill us. We had a limited scope. We needed them not to harbor terrorists who wanted to come to America. So we ended up talking to them. Same thing, you know, with what we could and should be doing right now with the Iranians, with the Shias. But in general, I do think we have to look at, like, a lot of the root causes. Anytime that you start looking at the things that bin Laden or ISIS or any of these organizations say, people will accuse you of, like, falling for, you know, their rhetoric, their propaganda. But if you consistently look at what bin Laden and what a lot of the Al-Qaeda operatives were saying, why they were focusing on America to attack America, a lot of it would tie right back into our support for Israel. I mean, there's even Al-Qaeda operatives, one of the 9/11 hijackers, Ziad Jarrah, who was from Lebanon, who was raised in a relatively secular environment. He specifically, in his manifesto and his will and testament, he basically cites a lot of the atrocities that were committed against Palestinian refugee camps inside of Lebanon as one of his reasons for joining Al-Qaeda and volunteering for a suicide mission. So at some point, if you hear that enough over and over again, we have to ask ourselves basically just the basic proposition: is the support that we're giving for Israel and the actions Israel that they are taking, is it worth it for us based on the amount of blowback terrorism that we're receiving? The blowback terrorism issue is very contentious, and a lot of people don't like talking about it, but it's a fact. You know, when we do kill what we think is terrorists, we are usually creating more terrorists. And so at some point, you do have to be able to isolate the terrorists and kill them with accuracy. But you also have to make that calculation. Is this operation worth it? Are we going to create more terrorists by conducting this operation? So yeah, those types of discussions, I think, need to happen way more often inside the national security apparatus.
Let me get that clip. Kill terrorist. Is Brad Pitt playing in a movie? There it is. The movie. All right, so it's a 5-minute clip. That's part of it. I think it's called War Machine. There's a clip. It's 5 minutes. I won't play the whole thing, but he goes. Let me actually play some of it. Hold on. Play this, Lisa, with the audio. And while Lisa's putting it on, play with the audio. Won't play it all. But just to mention, like, I despise ISIS. I despise the way they govern. I think bombing ISIS and weakening ISIS was the right decision. All I'm saying is that, like, I think that was the right decision, but that decision wouldn't even be necessary because ISIS wouldn't have become stronger if there wasn't the core problem that happened beforehand: weakening governments, causing war, causing that hatred that led to groups like ISIS. ISIS wouldn't exist if the instability that happened beforehand didn't happen. Like Syria, you know, I'm not an expert in that field. Probably you know a lot more than I do. I don't like Assad whatsoever, but when you just lead Syria into a failed state, you start getting groups like ISIS popping up. Play the clip. Play the clip with Lisa. You know which movie I'm talking about? The Brad Pitt War Machine one?
Yeah. I haven't seen it in a while.
Let's play if he's... Yeah, me too. He's such a good actor. Play it with the audio, Lisa, for a few seconds. Hopefully it's going to get the right part. And that he sums it up pretty well for us. Like, that movie sums it up better than US foreign policy. Hollywood knows what they're talking about sometimes. Play it.
8, of course. 8, right?
Start again. Hold on. Start again. Okay. Okay.
Huh? Now let's say you kill 2 of them. Now, how many insurgents do you have left? Well, you'd say 8, of course. 8, right? Right? Wrong. In this scenario, 10 minus 2 equals 20. Let's say the 2 insurgents you just killed each had 6 friends or brothers or some such who are hovering on the brink of joining the insurgency. They're thinking about this insurgency thing. Looks interesting, but, you know, for one reason or other, not for me. But, so, then you go and kill their friend. Now you just made up their minds for them. Those hovering friends are now full, paid-up members of the enemy. Yeah. And so, in the math of counterinsurgency, 10 minus 2 equals 20.
Well, I think that video means a lot. You can remove it, Lisa. That video, honestly means a lot. I think it should be. You can remove it, Lisa. But yeah, it's just something that, like when you go to Mujtaba Khamenei, you want Iran to be more friendly to the US, yeah? I would love to see Iran welcome to the global community, do business with the US, bring more prosperity to American investors and businesses, and more prosperity to the Iranian people and the global economy. But then when you go and kill, like people, you can hate Mujtaba Khamenei as much as you like, and you have every reason to. But just anyone that has kids, I don't know if you have kids, but anyone that has kids, a family, a loved one, just imagine those people getting killed by someone. Under what scenario can you go and shake the hand? Trump is like, oh, I'd love to meet the guy. I'd love to shake his hand. Under what scenario could you expect that leader to go and shake another leader's hand? It's, yeah. So yeah, man, you gotta get that. Talk to Tucker, talk to Tulsi. Come on, guys, get to it. We're waiting for you. The world is waiting for you.
I agree. If there's anything we should learn over the last 20 plus years, though, it's exactly that. And I believe that Brad Pitt's character is based off General Stan McChrystal in Afghanistan when we were trying to turn the tide there. But basically, the train had already left the station, and we had already created more insurgents than we needed to. But I mean, these are correlations that we should learn. And a big frustration that I have right now is that we're not implementing the lessons that we learned over the last 20 plus years, other than, more missile technologies. We can bomb more things and basically create more insurgents and more enemies over the long run.
Yeah, I agree. Joe, I always enjoy our conversations, man. Thank you for your time as always. Always a pleasure. And I'll ask you this question every time. Probably every time you come on, I'll say, hey, any more clarity on what you plan to do next? Anything you can tell us? So we'll keep trying. We'll see how that evolves.
Yeah, exactly. Hopefully things become more clear. I'm trying to figure it out too.
All right, man. I appreciate you coming on. Thank you, Joe.
Yep. Take care.
Take care, man. All right, guys. I'll be live again. I think in about 3 hours, I'll be live with, let me check, with Azzy and Matthew Ho. So me and Azzy are going to chat to Matthew Ho. And then we have Brendan Weichert. We have Ray McGovern, Anthony Aguilar, Larry Johnson. So great lineup as always. I hope you enjoyed this conversation with Joe. Let me know your thoughts. I've got 3 hours, so I'll go through the comments as I have my breakfast. All right, guys. See you soon. 3 hours. Bye.